excited to be here, more excited than ever, because I've got three of my favorite colleagues on LinkedIn, individuals you know very well from the shows they've been on, and especially Kelle, who's been here since January 19th, a date that will always be engraved in my mind as a real turning point for myself, Kelle, and so many others. And the word of the day is active listening. We love to hear what you have to say. We depend on you for relevancy and for bringing some great takeaways today. So with that said, well, let me turn it over to Kelle. Kelle can bring you up to date. She's got a wonderful opportunity coming up in Florida. I'm sure she'd love to share it with you. And let's kick it off, Kelle.
Yeah, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are tuning in from. Yeah, so many exciting things happening. I will be heading to Florida next week for the Department of Defense Warrior Games with Wheelchairs for Warriors, which I'm super pumped about. They're going to be having an incredible pit crew there to help all the adaptive sports that will be going on there. So when folks have a blowout with their wheelchair, needing repair, they will come on over to the pit crew so they can get back out on the field or court, depending on their prospective sport. So it's 10 days long. So it's an incredible event, which I likely would never have known about if it weren't for Wheelchairs for Warriors. And to connect this with active listening, I will say it all comes from doing LinkedIn Lives, listening to folks, listening to what people want to hear, sharing stories and listening, because I connected with Crystal Lee Larimore, who is the founder of Wheelchairs for Warriors, last October. She was connected with Christy's old boss, and she was a guest on my show, The Awesome Journey with Christy Howard. And we just kept a connection through that whole time. And as soon as they started having some openings, because of course their mission to provide custom fit mobility solutions for veterans and first responders injured in the line of duty, just really touched me hard as far as like, wow, it's amazing that you all exist. It's a shame you all have to exist, but God bless that you all exist. But listening over time, as they needed some help with certain things, and I stepped in, and I believe things all work out the way they're supposed to. And I'm just super blessed that I get to be doing work with them. And really from that date of January 19th, 2023, starting this live journey that I had no idea where it was going to take me, except for it does allow you to focus on being present and actively listening to others, because that is the time we learn the most, is when we're listening, even though I talk an awful lot, I know.
Well, that's great, Kelle. And, I'm honored to have done so many shows together, and hopefully many more. And what has really been gratifying is to see people's evolution and growth. Yeah. And I think live streaming allows you to be listening in the moment with the people you're with at the time. None of what we're doing here is scripted. It goes wherever it tends to naturally gravitate to, and it continues, so it doesn't just stagnate, it just builds. And I think Kelle makes a great point, is you never know what you don't know, you never know who you don't know, but getting to know them is important for getting to work with them. And too many people have to make that leap of faith with, well, seems pretty good, sounds great, let's do it. And then halfway in, all of a sudden, new information or surprises come up. So this is a much more thoughtful way of developing relationships. With that, Dave, love to hear your latest achievements or accomplishments or initiatives going forward.
Well, it's magnificent to be back, as always. Love seeing everybody here. Nothing really spectacular as much as Kelle's is going on in my life, but it's a wonderful organization, that she's helping out, and And I was remiss in the fact that she's sitting here talking about active listening, and I had to look at my phone real quick. I apologize, but I was listening. And Don, I just start off with the fact that I really appreciate the kind words from your show with Beverly. I was happy to join in, if only shortly, on Tuesday. Things here are just getting into the summer groove and enjoying the work that I'm doing and helping others through my business, through my personal engagements, and reconnecting with folks as the weather is more beautiful.
Well, that's wonderful, Dave. And you're one of the humblest person I know that comes on the show. And that shows, and that's important, and I do believe you make a great point, and Kelle epitomizes it, is the more promotion you can give to honest, authentic people, the more you're going to not only help them, but help yourself as far as your perception out there. People can pick up on kindness and thoughtfulness and allowing somebody in the line in front of them. And it works, and it works well. So moving on to Jason.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here, and I love this whole group, and I love all of Don's community. I try to pop in as much as possible in the mornings because everyone, kind of the common thread is that everyone does care, and that's kind of talking about active listening. That's the quote that I want to start off with, share with, is that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think that's the part about active listening, obviously, is that when you're engaging and you're like, oh, I'm interested in what you have to say, then they'll be interested in what you have to say, evenly. So, and that's the thing about this community, is that everybody cares. Everyone, Don, you've attracted a lot of amazing people, and over the, your 1,000 shows or whatever you've done, the folks that have shown up are the folks that are supposed to show up, and a lot of good things going on here. So I'm going to leave it at that, just so we kick it off here and see what the community has to say, and then see where we go this morning.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jason, because I found you're better off working with less people more often for familiarity. Too many people are always looking for the next guest, but if they never come back, what was the idea with bringing them on in the first place? Or they don't relate to your audience, or vice versa. And, it's a joy to be with people you really care about. What I've seen is the progression goes from audience to community to family and friends. And it finds its way there. And there is more than just the connection or the relationship. It's the connectivity. And I think that goes a long way, knowing people are rooting for you. People are backing you up. People are promoting you when you're not even there. And everybody ratcheting up together can go a long way, because you do get judged by who you surround yourself with, right? If you're around some really high level quality individuals, it only makes your presence more visible and worthwhile. So, it's so great when you can be generous as a discipline and find out it pays even more than any other thing you can do. So Kelle, long time, a lot of shows, a lot of relationships, and a ton of conversations. We've been very fortunate to have been polished by the people that we surround ourselves with, and pick up little tidbits here that, with the pitch slap. I mean, everybody has something that just bubbles up, and you just say, I'll take some of that too. So Kelle.
Yes. Oh, the pitch slap. Oh my gosh, y'all. That is just like my biggest pet peeve. It's astonishing, and now I can't help it. But people need to actively listen to this. If you are doing an email automation campaign in LinkedIn, and it starts off by trying to sell your thing to a brand new connection, you have missed the boat. Like, you've closed that door to opportunity. Because truly creating a relationship, like, it's sad to say that it's old school, but it's new school again. Like, people appreciate the connecting with people, because it isn't always about what can I do for you or what can you do for me, because over time you end up finding out, I meet people and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I need to connect Dave to this person, or I need to connect Jason to this person. because it's in their lane. And those are things we don't think about is if you are pitch slapping someone right away, you're just closing the opportunity. It's not a matter of, oh, maybe later they'll come back, because it doesn't feel good and people don't like it. And the analogy I tend to use is think about when you're sitting across a table from someone, and if they are to lunge at you, what is your response to that? It is to pull away from it. That is what that pitch slap does in the inbox. People don't like it. So please stop. And you all use the same script, by the way. You change a few words, but we all recognize it. So please stop it. So there's my little piece of advice for active listening. Listen to your customers and or who you think your avatar is of your audience. Listen to them. That is what we did with this live when we started. Don and I certainly didn't know what the heck I was doing, but it was listening how people were just looking for community, which is really about being supported and feeling safe. And that's a big thing, because when we feel those things, that's when we feel personally as we're heard. And that's what we want. And we feel brave to try new things too, which I think is important, and have your community be celebrating you. That feels amazing. And also to be there when you fall on your face, because guess what? We're all going to do it, because it's just part of life. So that's my free little nugget takeaway on that one.
That's always great. I always love to hear your insights. And it just reminds me yesterday of Dean LeBay, who me and Kelle got to know really early on, and he was an everyday individual, and he took off. And I know, without going into a lot of detail, Kelle and myself did a lot to try to help and support him. And he would come back with some wonderful emails or messages giving us that credit. And, that validation that you can help somebody take another day for themselves, give themselves some time. It's just like the pitch slap. Everything in the moment is too little, too soon. And I think until you get to have the confidence, and what I've seen about some really extraordinary, successful people, they're the most generous when they come on the show. They're not here to sell a book. They're not here to promote a speech. They're here for themselves, but they're here to help others. And, I always think of Ford, who I learned stuff all the time, Ford Sykes. He never had parents. He grew up without parents, left school in the 9th grade, started his first business at 15, and now he's one of 200 Hall of Fame speakers that is still alive, published 300 books. That's incredible. And the speech engagements are 25K plus, and he has no limit on how many opportunities he has, and he loves the show. And it's because he gets to be who he is, and he gets to react in the moment. Usually he's the guy delivering everything, hoping it hits, versus receiving things and being able to respond. So, I know Dave, and that's the nice thing about knowing Kelle and Dave and Jason. You remember when you met them. You remember where they were and what their thinking is. And even though they may not see dramatic change and positive change, you do. And again, that just gives you more reason to support everybody, because the higher everybody flies together. With that, let me just introduce Kerry's here. Wouldn't be the same without Kerry. With his joke, what do you call a vanilla milkshake that likes to wrap vanilla ice? One thing I'll say about Kerry, he keeps it clean. So, even how funny it may be, and it is funny at times, it's a nice, positive distraction for everybody. And I think what we've learned is humor goes a long way, and a smile can last a lot of miles. Dennis is here. Always great to see Dennis, another everyday regular. Has so many great rhymes. So between our comic and poet laureate, we've got a pretty good benefit here. I think we have to face up so we don't fall down on our face and get disgraced. And, I think it's really not how many times you fall, but how often and how fast you get up.
Mm.
Everybody's going to get knocked down. And if you challenge yourself, you're going to get knocked down harder and more often. But every time you get up stronger for the lessons learned, and it numbs you to the pain you might have had early in the game. It's like building muscles. There's a saying, no pain, no gain. I'm not 100% behind that. But, you do get stronger with experience, with time, and it gives you context. So, Dave, you're a champion runner now.
Hardly call myself a champion. I'm working to get better every day. That's the best thing. And I've hit some, to your point, I've hit some roadblocks, and I've just had to come back and say, okay, what am I going to do different? How am I going to interact with my physio? How am I going to interact with my docs, my trainers? What am I going to do? So I was thinking, as Kelle was talking, just something I kind of recent story of getting back to our roots and engaging with people, beyond the electronic sales pitch, the electronic connection, even a video chat like we're doing here. We can relate to people, we can understand, we can react to facial cues and the communications. And this past week, I went old school, and I just talked to a lawyer about it Monday night, and I sent letters to some law firms as a private investigator saying, look, you guys still have an old school aura about you, so I'll go back to old school letters. And he really appreciated that. And I sent a letter, and I got a response, private investigation needs by a law firm. I said, hey, this is great, I'm getting some feedback. But then I was a little, I won't say dismayed, the story here is the paralegal texts me, she says, hey, can you send over your document so we can sign it electronically? And I said, I'd really like to meet you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want this to be an email relationship. Let's talk about what your problem is. What it is you want me to solve. And the lawyer said, oh, look, I'm really busy. I just really don't have time. And I said, then we need to get on at least on a phone call. And I tell you what, the 5-minute email that he typed versus the 15-minute phone call, I got exponentially more feedback.
Mm-hmm.
It was more realistic of what he expected me to do versus go do this. Well, I don't know what that means. And I told him, look, he said, look, I can't afford this. And I said, okay, well, what can we work on together that you can afford? What are your expectations? I've got my expectation, you've got yours. Let's meet, let's talk.
Okay.
And so many times that we miss the opportunities to listen and engage because we've gotten into this electronic world of, I'm going to text you, I'm going to email you. Let's have a face-to-face, even if it is on the camera, so I can understand, I can ask more questions, I can actively listen to what it is you're saying, and I can repeat back. And I did that several times. Is this what you're looking for? No, not quite. Okay, well, that 15-minute call is much better than a 5-minute, email to type and 1 minute to read. So it really is it's something that I think we're starting to see a pendulum shift again. It's never going to go back to strictly on letters and handwritten notes. And at the same time, we need to re-engage a little bit on a personal level. And I'm glad to see some people making that shift.
Well, I think you make a wonderful point because it isn't a one-way street. And when you have enough going on and enough wonderful people that you're surrounded by, you're qualifying the client as much as they're qualifying you. In the past, it's like, hey, whatever the client wants, that's what I'll do.
Right.
I'm looking for work, I'm looking to make some money. And now it's like, well, if we can qualify ourselves out early, that gives everybody the opportunity to move on and find the right fit. And I think that's really what we're talking about. I think you made a great point with old school mail, is everybody knows how rare that is, how much more time it takes, and how much more thought it takes versus just a couple, quick sentences or cool or yes. And being different does give you more awareness, you know?
Well, I think this is, I think active listening, if I may, it's trying to bring back some personal connection.
Yes.
You know, we're too technical, and not in the sense that we know how to code, but we're using electronics for our relationships. And that's, what am I trying to do when I'm in a phone call, in a meeting, or in a video chat? I'm trying to build trust. And if I'm just sending a note back and forth, I'm not getting emotion, I'm not getting an understanding, and I may not answer their needs. And then I've lost their trust. They don't think I can satisfy their need that they're paying me for. So am I going to get repeat business from that? No. But and at the same time, if I go through the motions, prime that pump early, build that trust, and then the next time he can make a 1-minute statement to me, and I go, yeah, I know what he wants because I've trusted him. I've learned from him. We want to get that immediate gratification. You know, we got the job done, move on. But what about the next job and the next job, and connecting with people? And I think that, you know, when Jason and I do the show with you, Don, on transition, and we come from a military background, a lot of us lose that connection because everything we do in the military as a unit, we have connection and cohesion. Then we go into the civilian world and we're on our own. You don't have necessarily, even on a team, you're not living together. You're not in the dirt together, on the ship together, whatever it is. So we need connection as humans, and actively listening to each other drives that connection better.
Yeah, those are excellent points. I hope everybody's taking notes, because what everybody should avoid is superficial transactional relationships. Right. You know, once you get to know somebody, you can do more for them when you really care for them, right? You're not watching the clock as much. You're not doing just enough. You're doing whatever it takes and being the better person, giving more than you expect to get, because it's the first step, right? If, to Kelly's point with the pitch slap, if it's the last step as soon as you start going. And, you know, the other thing I notice about first, let's say, pitch slaps, anything over a paragraph is, you can almost discount it, right? Because when it gets to 3-4 paragraphs, and now we're explaining how their lead generation machine can work for you and everything else. Jason, caught you smiling there. What's your thoughts?
Well, just on that, it's just so funny where, you know, we talk about active listening and communicating. We're talking about communication is what we're talking about. And in that realm, it's just funny where Kelly had mentioned it last time, where they're talking to you like you don't do what you do. It's like, did you even take the 15 seconds to read what I do? Like, people pitch me certain things and I'm like, well, that's what I do for a living. I'm not sure I'm really going to hire you to do what I do, because that's weird, you know. And that's communication. You know, that within all of that, there's presupposition. You know, I'm trained in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, and one of the presuppositions of NLP is that the meaning of communication is the result you get. So no matter what you're trying to say, no matter what that is, what that result is what that communication meant to the other person. So if you think you have this eloquent, beautiful sales pitch, if the other person's like, they're just trying to sell me something, they don't care about me, that's what that communication meant. It didn't mean anything else what you're trying to do. And the same thing with us as humans communicating, and that's something that everyone's talked about so far that I wanted to mention, is that how we communicate is very important. You know, I have sometimes people reach out to me, and friends and family, and in a text with some heavy stuff, and I'm like, nope, I am not replying in the text. This is not a text type conversation. There is so much nuance. You know, just speaking about NLP, one of the first things you learn is how to read another person and see what their actual reaction to what you're doing is. So you can see if we do this technique, they might say with their words, well, that didn't work. But when you watch their skin color and their tonus and their breathing and a myriad of other things that we're trained to look for, you can see that they're actually reacting to it. And so as we communicate, you know, Dave was talking about emails or getting on a phone call. Well, a phone call, you can hear the tone of their voice and you can hear the pitch. And, a lot of bad things have been said about sarcasm. That's just how I was raised. So I'm an expert at dry humor and sarcasm, and that does not translate. Trust me, that does not translate on a digital format. So I have to be aware of that. And I'm like, there needs to be a sarcasm button or emoji that they get. Oh, I'm joking. This is a dry humor. But I think it's very important as we communicate to be engaged, and that's what we're talking about, is active listening and communication, and it's that engagement. And that's why things like this, you can see what the other person is looking like and saying. John, you saw I was laughing and kind of smirking, and that's the point. You can see that. But if we were on texting, you might not have seen that. So the modality is very important too.
Yeah, those are great points. And, your earlier statement is, nobody knows how much you care until you really show how much you care, or nobody knows how much you know or cares about how much you know. And you just wonder, why are people having a two-person conversation who only care about the one person, which is themselves?
Right.
I had a call this week with a gentleman, had a great profile, which was deceiving. 20-some thousand connections, doing some amazing things. When he got on the phone, hardly made any, on the Zoom, any eye contact, but started eating like plums and picking his teeth along the whole thing. And I'm thinking, I'm not that sensitive and discriminating, but geez, how hungry could you be? That you couldn't wait till the show was over or eat before it. And, it just gives you they say there's only one chance to make a first impression.
Right.
And you have to be there just like a person who enters the stage, and you got to be on. Believe me, there's comedians who do fabulous sets and are suffering. Their life is not 100%, but they can't bring that into their act because people are paying with their time and with their finances, and you got to give them the right show. And I think that's why separating yourself and understanding, what kind of look am I giving? Am I smiling naturally? Am I happy with the person? Am I actually asking someone to tell me more about something that's really important to them?
Right.
And I think that's part of active listening. When I had my stores and when I started out initially, every person was an opportunity. Your first customer is like, you'll never forget them. But I used to always try to see what they were most proud of. A lot of times they'd have a big Western belt buckle, and you knew there had to be something to the story there, or that you'd see their pickup truck and it was all tricked out and it was just gorgeous, and you'd say, boy, sincerely, I think that's a beautiful truck. Tell me a little bit about it. And once people open up about themselves, they get a chance to open up to you.
Right.
But if everybody's tightly wound and people are making small moves that aren't very significant, it takes a lot longer. And eventually, I think, you got to open up to allow other people to open up. You got to model for them, and hopefully it is contagious. With that said, Carrie, who is always moving forward, says, I've gotten up a lot of times, still attempting to get going in life. Well, I think the key word there is attempting. There's a saying, never, never, never give up. And I can tell you one thing, sometimes I never saw the light at the end of the tunnel, but I never saw the end of the tunnel, and you just take it one step at a time. And the people who keep going get where they want to go. And, I've seen so many people, when the sun's out, everybody's so happy. As soon as it gets cloudy, half the people leave. Starts raining, hardly a few people are left on the beach. But they're the first ones when the sun comes out, and I think that's important. Perseverance, tenacity, all these attributes that say I'm getting a little stronger, a little better every day. And I've got a lot of days ahead of me. So the hope, the faith, the belief carries you beyond yourself. And I believe anytime you're involved with something bigger than yourself, you lose track of yourself, right? how many times have you been so involved somebody forgot to eat lunch? Right? And it was just, you're not even hungry, but you were so focused and so happy in the moment. With that said, Dennis says, yes, being a champion helps you and others better than being a chumpion. Good play on words, Dennis. And also, thanks for bringing all the wonderful people to your show so we get and stay in the know and not the short and simple know. And, having these wonderful relationships that are so time efficient. We can get 4 people together at the same time, sharing their wealth. And, I always find that there's benefit and there's more collateral benefit. If all I had was Kelle or Dave or Jason or all of us, I learn so much. I grow so much. I get better. And if anybody's watching today, that makes the party even bigger and better. And then the people who will watch in the future, who will probably never get to meet or know, who continue to pick up something from Kelle or Jason or Dave, a little thing. And sometimes that little thing gives you that stimulus to really move into bigger areas. So Dave, or maybe it's Kelle.
Oh, either way. I defer to Kelle.
Kelle.
So many great things that y'all just said, and one of them specifically I wanted to be sure that I went back and mentioned is one of the issues, of course, with any kind of digital communication, whether it's text message, email, whatever the situation. Because I've used the example of like, this is my opinion of why I think online dating is such like a weird thing. And I don't mean weird that it doesn't work. I know it's done success stories, so I'm not knocking it, folks. But the problem with it, the communication, when it's all electronic, it is all about my perception of the message, how I want to perceive it. I want to believe that Dave, that I just met online, is this great guy. He sent me this nicest email. But it's your perception. And it's the same in the business world when we're doing too much email back and forth to someone else. And I've seen this happen to so many people, is they'll be like, I think he's pissed at me because he just responded to my email with like 2 words. Like, no, he's not mad at you. He's the CEO and he's running 100 miles an hour and he's just acknowledging your email. I promise you, he doesn't answer anybody with a full sentence. So it's all about our own perception. And that's hard sometimes for, I think, people to understand. And I'll sit there because I'm just self-aware. And sometimes it'll even be, I'll be like, wow, why did that email just upset me? Like, what's going on with me that email message made me upset? So I think there's definitely a part of the digital communication and what Dave said, which was so important. And I just had a conversation with somebody about this yesterday, is about the mirroring exercise, mirroring back. What is it that you heard? Because a lot of times we, as whether you're a consultant or, in a sales position, whatever it is in your own business, what you mean by what you're offering for your services and what that means to you is different than a client. Because I get a lot of clients, as an example, who have bad feelings about people who do websites. Web developers are just the worst. They've screwed me over I don't know how many times. Well, the problem isn't because they screwed them over. They didn't know what they were asking for. Or they, you know what I'm saying? So they talk a different language. So things will be said, and it's like people aren't going out of their way to do what I think Dave does, which is so important. Let me be sure I'm hearing you right, that this is what you want, and this is what we do, or let me explain further what it means when I say this. So I think active listening in that part, but it again goes back to Jason, just all around communication and being sure that we understand each other. Did you mean this when you said that? I'm not clear on what you actually meant there. Let me ask you a couple more questions. I think we get too stuck in thinking, well, they asked me to do X, Y, Z, so I'm going to do X, Y, Z. Well, a lot of times if you ask more questions, XYZ, one, could maybe turn into something more, which is of course great for any consultant. But 2, it shows the value that you add because they feel heard. People love to feel heard, period. I mean, it really is that simple. So I'll leave it there and toss it back over to Dave.
Well, I think you left it in a wonderful place. And I think that's so important, is take responsibility and accountability for your lack of awareness. So it's much easier to say to someone, I'm a little confused here. Can you help me out and explain this in a little more detail? Or if you're put off, you could come back and say, that's kind of interesting, but somehow it doesn't feel right. What was your intention? Because if you assume too much responsibility and accountability, you let the other person off. And if it's a one-time conversation, it doesn't matter. But if it's a precedent, you got to ask yourself, am I going down the rabbit hole here with this person? Or am I afraid to speak my mind because I'm afraid, oh, they're going to take this as something a little too direct? And if that's the case, well, you just learned something about that person. You know, I mean, everybody wants to get married before they have their first date. And I think that's what Pitch Slap is all about, you know, is like, hey, we're going to do something important. Can we take some extra time to get things out front? Because nobody likes surprises, good or bad, especially if they knew you knew way before they knew, right? It's like, why were you hiding this? You know, why weren't you out front with this? And I think a lot of people say, well, I know if they knew what I know, they'd never get going with me. So why not just start anywhere and hope because they invested time or resources, they're going to stick with it, or I'll have a chance to prove myself in different ways. But that's too much self-promotional and too much really thinking more of yourself than another person, and that shows. So Dave, how have you, moving from military life to civilian life, and I imagine in the military people take direction, right? And a lot of times don't have a lot of discussion.
You're saying that to the one guy who never took direction well. That's why my career tapped out where it did. Yeah, I mean, people do what they're told for the most part, and you know, there's times and places where you have to question, hey, did you really mean this, Skipper? Did you really want me to do that? Or, hey, why didn't you do it the way I asked you to do it? Because there was a reason I told you to do X, Y, and Z in that order. You know, when we do, you know, think of aviators, they have their SOPs, their procedures for an emergency, and same thing on ships with engineering and driving a ship. Yeah, we always have to deal with what is the communicated message. And I want to go back a step to something I wrote down on the side, which I'll call resting witch face instead of what we call it here. To your point, Kelle, about perception. And I've often been accused of, well, and I was just having this conversation just yesterday, I think it was, with my daughter, you know, having resting witch face. Or what is it that, you know, just our general demeanor when we're around, what does that convey? And I remember, it was probably about 10 years ago, I had a couple of sailors come up to me and say, gosh, sir, if I known you were like you are now, when I first saw you, I never would have gone up and talked to you because you just had resting witch face. You just look like a mean, you know, stern guy. I didn't have this happy-go-lucky face or something, you know, and I get that way sometimes when I go into networking events. I'm a little isolated and I'm not putting forth a good message. And again, like Jason said, this is about communicating. What are we communicating? How are we going to be perceived based on how we're emitting energy, if you will? And I think that's very important. And having connection, taking that next step, you have the first opportunity to make a first impression. Great. And if we take first impressions at face value, we're going to lose out on great connections. Okay. What was my first impression, you know, coming on your show, Don? I've told you before, my back was covered in sweat. I was nervous. I'm sure the people looked at me and said, God, I don't know if I like this guy, because I wasn't really comfortable yet. We hadn't gotten to know each other. We were a little, you know, feeling each other out. And now I'm, I can say certain things that I wouldn't have said 9 months ago, 10 months ago, almost now. And it's really about building that rapport and relationship, but you've got to get beyond the perception, beyond that first impression sometimes, and get beyond skin deep. Dating profiles online, for example, Kelle, are just skin deep. They're just that inch deep. I'm not understanding what does it really what really makes up the person that I want to connect with. And until I get beyond that first layer and start, I hate the onion because I always go back to Shrek in my mind. Ogres are like onions. But that's really what it is really getting to understand and know somebody, having those offline discussions. Like Kelle and you and I have had discussions after we've gone off live, and we've gotten to know each other. And that's really what this is about. And to my last point here is, life is a journey. You're pointing out people need to see the end of the tunnel sometimes, Don, see the bigger picture. And I really found that once I had a goal or multiple goals that fit a purpose of my life and what I wanted to achieve, it made it so much easier. I could relax that resting witch face a little bit and say, I don't care what all this other noise is. I'm focused here. And if it doesn't fit my path, I'm not going to join in. And then I'm happier. I'm lifting myself up. And, at the very beginning, we all rise with the rising tide. So why not find your meaning, your purpose, and drive towards it?
Yeah, those are great points. I hope people are listening, because only a few of the points we're making could be life-changing, could be transformational, because that could be the thing blocking someone for coming into their own, being natural, being comfortable. And, it's not only getting to know the other person, it's having the other person get to know you. And I think when everybody understands they're in the same boat, it makes it easier. Jason.
Yeah, just to talk on Dave's point for a second, I've gone through the same thing. I can look very stoic. I can look intimidating. I mean, I'm 6 foot. I'm 200 pounds plus. I'm a big guy, Marine Corps and all that. But I'm a big goofball, and I think you guys have seen that. You've seen that side of me. I like to joke and have fun and just be silly. And even when I was working as in the leadership roles, I'm like, listen, if I can come in here today and not have to correct anybody and just have a fun time, I'm going to go home in tears. I'm going to be so happy. I'm going to go home in tears. And so I get where that perception is. But I think the flip side of that coin is we then owe that to everybody else. And to be able to tie in and say, you know what, maybe we've all been misjudged in our lives for whatever reason, whether it's our parents or something we misspoke or whatever. Let's give everyone else that opportunity to show us who they truly are. And that's active listening. Let me not judge who this person is based on their role, based on their parents, based on the myriad of things that we judge things on. That's just the human animal. We want to be safe. So we're looking for all these cues and these signals. And let me listen. Let me hear what they have to say. Let me take in what they're actually putting out as a human being, as a person, and make not judgment, because judgment, that's a whole nother conversation, but and then go deal with them at that point from where they're coming at, And just another point as we're kind of rounding the horn here that I wanted to make is that whether it's business or in mental health, one of the most challenging things is feeling alone in a crowded room. And whether that's, you don't feel that you're heard, that you don't have a voice, or that you can't speak out, that comes with active listening and people actually paying attention and listening to you and giving you that feedback. Like, I taught a course in leadership about communication, and 2 words we had taken out. We said, we always told the people, it was a 2-day course, and we always said these 2 words take out of your vocabulary. One was but. We talked about that, I think, last time we were together, because that nullifies everything before that. But the other word was understand. Oh, I understand where you're coming from. And it's like, well, no, you really don't, because this is what I'm trying to say. And so we say, take understand out, but you would listen to, they called the technique listen to learn, where you would feed it back to them. And what Kelle and Dave was, and Don was all you've been talking about, you feed it back to them. And as a generic template. So what I hear you saying is that you don't like when we do this, or what I'm, and then they have the opportunity to say, well, no, that's not really it. It's this. And you go, oh, and then you gain the insight. They now feel that they're being heard, and it's a win-win. So that's that. I wanted to put that out there for sure.
Well, I love win-win, and sometimes you can get win-win-win out of it. You, them, and everybody else that's involved in it.
Yeah.
A couple more comments. Don't go down the bunny hole when you can up with the funny hole. Well, and I think,
Rap artists here.
yeah, but what it demonstrates is attitude is everything. And what I've said in the past is everybody hears your music, not always your words.
Right.
So if you're happy, enthusiastic, excited, it's going to develop more of that. And the other thing is when you have a problem with someone, maybe you have a problem with yourself that it's starting to identify. Right? Sometimes you ask yourself, why was I so sensitive to what it's a stranger. I don't even know this person. They don't know me well enough to know what it is that turns me on or turns me off or makes me feel bad. So you almost have to thank somebody for taking you off balance a little bit. Might surprise you, and you say, well, I got to work on that a little bit, and that's my issue. Because not everybody's going to come into your life exactly the way you want them, exactly the way you need them. And why would you want prepackaged anyways? When you can build together, you can start fresh. I look at a little bit of echo there, but we've got a new person I haven't seen, Jack Hemmings. Some really good advice here. Well, thank you. And then Carl, I've seen some people come on board, Harvey especially. He having a full-time job, having now 2 shows. He just had another sponsor this week. He was and maybe still is inviting 1,000 people a week to his shows. And if you ever been on one, 50, 60 comments, all in the franchising industry. Well, Carl's just another example. Has had a daily news show, a newsletter for months now, just added a second weekly newsletter, created his own show Tuesdays that precede this one, and is now going to be starting a second Thursday show. So, it's building. It's not just hoping everybody falls into your situation, but how you expand your situation to include more people. And the more you do, the easier it is to do it, And I think the other big thing is you got to be your own best friend, because sometimes you're the only friends you have. And you got to be very forgiving of yourself. And you got to be able to commute the sentences you create for yourself. How much punishment do you need? How much embarrassment do you have to live through? And just be grateful that I used to be like this, but look at where I am now. And it's where you are now and where you're going, because too many people regret and do this. What's done is done. It is what it is. How long do you want to dwell on it? How long do you want to beat yourself up? And it doesn't show a great motivating factor. So me and Carl are working on some incredible things, but it took all these months of finally getting to meet in a great place together, because for things to get better, you need to get better, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to be better to share more value. So thank you, Carl. With that, Dave, you're in a great position with all these wonderful insights.
Well, I think I'm just going to build on what you said real quick as we come up to the top of the hour. Is so many people. I was just reminded as you were talking, Don, of a friend of mine, or one of my uncles, is not related to me, nephews, was like, Uncle Marty, I really want to be like you when I grow up. I want this big house. I want this nice car. I want the pool and the finished basement with a bar in it, whatever. And my uncle looked at me and said, this didn't happen overnight. I think Uncle Marty was 50 at the time. He had 25 years in the Navy. It took a long time to earn the money, get the freedom to do what he wanted. So we got to build the growth and over time. And what somebody asked me about my own business, I said, look, I'm planting seeds now so that 6 months from now, I can have that relationship and I can, blossom then. It's taking, you can't jump into a business and go, I'm going to be a 6-figure business tomorrow. Unless you had something lined up 6 months prior to say, I'm quitting my full time and now I'm 6 figures, but you still had a window of work to build relationships, to get processes together, get products together, whatever it is, then you can jump into the 6 figures. But you got to plant the seed and there's got to be relationships. There's got to be business work done. It doesn't just happen overnight. And we see that too many times, back to technology, with, I need 1 million followers. I need 20,000 connections on LinkedIn. Well, what does that do me? I don't know who those 20,000 people are. I can barely keep in touch with the 200 friends that I've met in the last 10 years. So we need to come back to, where is it that we can grow?
Yeah, I think that's so important. And, people are such a rush to get somewhere. And when they get there, they can't wait to rush to somewhere else.
Yeah.
And sometimes where you are is where you're supposed to be. Right. And, it's kind of interesting that just in the last few weeks, it started occurring to me, I've never been happier in all my life. And how many people actually realize that to themselves? That you are enough. You have so much to be grateful for. And it's the people in your life. I've had money. I've lost money. I've made a lot more money. It comes and goes. But, if you don't have time or people to enjoy it with, it's empty. What's another 6 rooms when you're walking around alone, when you have no one who cares about you? Those are the things that please, Dave.
Let me jump in. I just read a story yesterday that think of John Astor and these multimillionaires on the Titanic. They gave up their seats and died on the Titanic, and their wives did too, because they would rather be with their loved ones than worry about their millions of dollars in their mansions on land. That was a real quick injection. I'm sorry.
I think that's beautiful, because if everybody cared more about everybody, they would get cared. It would be a better world. Right? If everybody gave somebody the benefit of the doubt, if everybody reserved judgment, if everybody accepted people as humans, not what did they wear, where did they live, what are they driving, because that's deceptive, and it's not something everybody can realize, right? Not everybody can have an 8,000 square foot house, but there's a lot of people that can have a nice apartment, have the nice pictures around them. If I had to leave, I could leave here in 10 minutes with a box, and it would be all pictures and important things, right? It wouldn't be like, oh boy, I'm leaving a suit behind or something. And I think when you get grounded and when you can reach a level of happiness earlier and more often, you're there. Because at the end of the day, success should be happiness. If it doesn't lend itself to happiness, it's just accumulation. Right. And building piles of stuff just more or less clutter your life. And I think that's where minimalism can come into play. So Jason, these are so beautiful, these conversations, because they're heartfelt, but they're meaningful to all of us for the benefit of all of us, right? It's the opposite of the pitch slap. It's maybe the friendly touch that one can bring to it. Jason.
Yeah, I'll just leave it at this, that, we're sitting here having this conversation, and all of us have been through it. I can almost guarantee that at some point in our lives, we've been probably giving that communication, that one-way communication. And this isn't something to say, oh, well, we're perfect and you should be this way. It's like, no, it takes those lessons, it takes these learnings. And that's what's the beauty about LinkedIn Live, is we can have this open conversation and have the community join in and kind of talk about these things. And it's like, this is where use the benefit of our experience, where we've come from, whether it was the military or in my early years of retail leadership. I've been very directive in my communication, very one-way street in my communication, and it comes to a point where you realize relationships matter first and foremost. That's the biggest lesson. But then it's like, I found myself in places where I was dragging the boulder up the hill, up the mountain. And it's a lot better when we're all behind that boulder, pushing it up together. But sometimes you have to learn it the hard way. And that's what this communication is being like, oh, well, what do you have to offer? What are we saying back and forth? Let me hear what you have to add, and not just for the benefit of, well, what can I get out of it, but that relationships, because relationships will take you so far in this life, and that's so important. And that's, Dom, you and I were talking before this talk about kind of what with my job, with my business, and what's going on, and all these relationships are coming to fruition and just things are showing up. But it was never like, well, I'm going to do this and talk to these people and build these relationships to get something. It was like, let's build relationships, let's have some community and have a great time. And then now, the fruits of that is all coming out in a very positive ways for my business, beyond the fact that I have all these great relationships with these people that I truly love. And I think that's what comes from that, listening, communicating, is we all grow together.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And deeper is better than wider in most cases. So getting to know people over time. And, there's another saying that facts tell, stories sell. Everybody wants to hear your story. I mean, Kelly's story about her Christmas ornament, right? That sticks in my mind, or her relationship, with her family becomes my family. I got to know her dad better, right? I got to know her brother and her nephew, and I adopted them or accepted them. And, how many lives can you live when you accept other people into your life? And, Harvey was diving for a diamond ring when he was a kid, sticks with me. Or our soup that we used to make, stone soup, we had that story. So, I'm so grateful because people are sharing more than what they're looking for. They're sharing them. And when people can actually get excited by a story, by a memory, it makes your life better for being included and being trusted to hear it. And also honoring people who say things that a lot of people are afraid to say or aren't in a position to say yet. So, I think that's what it just compounds. So, Kelle, coming up on top of the hour, this has been another incredible show because we all have good hearts and we all are open to our hearts sharing with others. What's your final thoughts?
I mean, so many great things. I always love chatting with y'all because we go deep, and I love it. I learn so much every time, which is so great and enriching in my own life. I just kind of want to wrap by reminding everyone, I think the resting witch face, I do love that, Dave. I will be saying that more now because the other really isn't always great to say. But I want to remind everyone, because this is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. It is also PTSD Awareness Month. And we just so happen to be 4 mental health warriors, I would say, out in the community. Is when you notice someone who is acting different, whether it's resting witch face, which they normally don't have, or just a difference, pay attention to it, acknowledge it, ask them if they're okay. Hey, just checking in on you. Because I think that's an important reminder. And that's even on LinkedIn when we see people that have maybe not been posting in a while. And sometimes we miss it because I'll be like, oh, I didn't even notice they were gone. I feel terrible but sometimes you do. And it'll be like, hey, haven't seen you around in a while. Just wanted to check in and make sure everything's okay. And just to remind everybody to do that, check on people, because just because you may perceive that they've got a look on their face that they look like a witch, they may have something else going on. And just knowing that someone else listened actively by noticing their body language or their behavior change, that's a big hug. And I think maybe that's what we're not doing pitch slapping. We're doing some digitized or virtual hugging and sharing. So I think that's wonderful. And I will end like I always do, which I don't know if y'all knew, but Saturday was called Smile Power Day. Who knew that was a thing? Because there is power in a smile. It does make a difference in people's lives. It will save lives. I know people who have said specifically that a person's smile made them change taking their life that night because it showed that someone cared enough to smile at them, because it is an exchange of 2 people acknowledging one another in that moment. And so there is just so much power and beauty in that. So take that out in the world today and go out and shine so bright that others can't help but shine too.
Couldn't have said it better. And no matter how many times you say it, I still get encouraged by the shining light that you bring. Dave, this has been so much fun, and you're a big part of it. What's your final thoughts?
First thing is I got chicken skin every time Kelle says that. Just gets me going. But I just real quick, knowing the time is short, is building on Kelle's point is connection saves lives. It is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month and PTSD. And as someone who has been in both, mental illness and post-traumatic stress issues through my career and post-Navy career, I call somebody, help them look for that point. And I've been very thankful that people have noticed, like through the month of May, when I didn't make a whole lot of posts, said, "What's wrong? What's going on?" Which furthered me to make a post back and thank them and make stuff. So not that I was in distress. I'm not trying to indicate that, but it does make a difference. And I hope more people will connect on a deeper level as we've discussed today.
Great. And there's something to loving and being loved. And that goes a long way when you demonstrate that in the little things, which could be a pat on the back, could be a kind word. And just like we talked about, active listening. Hey, I just heard something that I wasn't aware of. Maybe you weren't even aware that you shared that with me, but now it makes me want to respond to it in a way, because what we're giving might be valuable, but it's not expensive. A kind word, a smile, that's something you have a reserve of and you can access quickly. It's not like, hey, I need 10 million bucks by next week, or something's not going to happen. Well, something's probably not going to happen at that point. Jason.
All of this wonderful conversation as always, and thank you all so much for having me joining this group, and it's always so beneficial. What I would say is mindfulness. That's something that word gets thrown around a lot right now, but mindfulness is just being fully present for your life, with open eyes and a loving heart. And that's what we're talking about, is just be present. Be present with those that are around you. Be present for yourself. Just be there. Be here now is the saying. And if you're present for yourself and you're present for others, the world will be a much better place.
Yeah, and I always agree. It's the peer-to-peer that's going to save this world, right? It's one person working with the person they're with or next to, adds a little bit of some value, which then they take with them and can add value to the next individual. And why not have a better, happier, collective world together? And I think people are starting to see the scarcity of being too virtual, being too automatic, too much AI, and they yearn for that closeness, for the humanity, because machines don't have that. That's an advantage we have, and we should take advantage of it. So with that, I want to thank everybody in the audience, want to thank everybody on the show. It really starts my day off in a just an unbelievable way, and it carries forward to the next person I'm going to spend time with. So the happier you are from wherever you come from is the happier you'll be to the next person you meet. And why not have a whole day where you say, geez, I hit it I hit every note. Every person I was with today was a benefit and a reward. And I think, Kelle mentions a lot, and I'm a full, agreement with it. Be grateful. Count your blessings. Take a journal and say, who did I meet today? What did I learn? And, just waking up in the morning is a gift, and having another day on the roller coaster of life, and that's what makes it fun, because one day that may not be there for you. So why hold off? Why hold back? Why not let it all out? Why not give it all back? You'll get more. Once you open something, you also open yourself up to more things. So anyways, we could talk forever, and that's why we never completed in an hour. Come back Monday. It's Carl and myself and another great lineup. Want to thank everybody so much, especially beautiful people on the show with me. I can't wait for our next show together. With that said,